The desert did not forgive mistakes. It erased them. By the third day, Eli Turner no longer remembered when he had last swallowed water. His canteen hung empty at his side, its dry rattle a cruel joke that followed every step. The sun pressed down without mercy, flattening shadows and baking the ground, until the air itself shimmered. Like molten glass, Apache Flats stretched in all directions, endless and indifferent, a place where men vanished without even leaving bones. His horse had bolted on the first night. His food was gone by the second morning. By the third afternoon, Eli was walking only because falling felt worse than moving. His lips were split and bleeding, his tongue swollen, his thoughts unraveling into fragments, memories of rivers, rain, cold nights he had once cursed. He stumbled over a stone and went down hard. The ground burned his skin through his clothes. He tried to push himself up, but his arms trembled and failed. The sky above him was too bright, too wide. Shapes drifted at the edges of his vision. Dark wings, moving shadows. Vultures, maybe, or tricks of the heat. Then the shadow stopped moving. Someone stood over him. At first he thought it was another hallucination, a figure carved from the glare itself. She was tall and still, wrapped in dark cloth that drank in the sunlight instead of reflecting it. Her hair was braided tightly, streaked with gray and dust, and her eyes were sharp enough to cut through the haze in his mind. Apache! Eli tried to speak, to beg, to explain anything, but his throat produced only a dry hiss. The woman crouched beside him, her movements careful, deliberate. She touched his wrist, felt the faint, fluttering pulse, then pressed her fingers gently against his cracked lips. "You should already be dead," she said softly. He barely registered the words before she lifted his head and brought him close. Something warm touched his mouth. Instinct overruled pride, fear, and confusion. He swallowed. The effect was immediate, like fire racing through ice-cold veins. His chest convulsed as his body clutched at life, dragging him back from the edge. He drank again, weakly, desperately, until his hands fell limp at his sides. The woman pulled away, her breath unsteady now, her expression unreadable. As darkness closed in once more, Eli heard her voice, quieter than the wind slipping over the stones. "The desert already took my husband," she whispered. "It won't take you too." Then the heat swallowed everything. Eli woke to shade and silence, the kind that pressed against the ears until his own breathing sounded foreign. For a moment he didn't know where he was, only that the pain had changed. The sharp, splitting agony of thirst had dulled into a deep ache, as if his body were remembering how to live again. He lay beneath a narrow rock overhang where the sun could not quite reach, the air cooler but heavy with dust. The woman sat a few steps away, her back straight, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She looked smaller than she had when he first saw her, as if the desert had quietly taken something while he slept. "You're awake," she said without turning. Eli swallowed. His throat still burned, but it no longer felt like sandpaper tearing itself apart. "You saved me," he said. The words came slowly, carefully. "I don't know how." She finally looked at him. "You were dying. I didn't let you." He tried to sit up and nearly failed. She steadied him with a hand that felt warm, but weak. Too weak. That was when he noticed her breathing, slower than before, measured, as if each breath cost her something. "There's no water," Eli said, scanning their small shelter. "No food. That shouldn't be possible." She nodded once. "Out here, possibility changes." After a long pause, she spoke of things her people believed, not as lessons but as facts, of infants lost on long crossings, of wounded hunters too weak to chew. When nothing else remained, life itself was shared, not spoken of, not celebrated. "Simply done. You gave me your strength," Eli said, the weight of it settling heavy in his chest. "I gave you time," she corrected. "The desert decides the rest." But as the hours passed, Eli watched the truth unfold. Her steps slowed when she gathered firewood. Her hands trembled when she worked flint against stone. Each time the sun climbed higher, it took more from her than it did from him. That night, the cold crept in fast, replacing the day's cruelty with another. Coyotes cried somewhere beyond the rocks, their voices thin and hungry. Eli pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders when she wasn't looking. A useless gesture, but the only one he had. "You shouldn't keep doing this," he said quietly. She stared into the small fire, eyes reflecting orange and black. "If I stop," she replied, "you die." The realization hollowed him out. Survival had tied them together, and the price was no longer his alone. The fourth morning came with no mercy. The sun rose fast and hard, bleaching the land until even the rocks seemed to recoil from its glare. Eli forced himself upright, every muscle protesting. But he was stronger now, strong enough to notice how much weaker Naya had become. She stood a short distance away, steadying herself with one hand against the stone wall, her shoulders tight, her face drawn thin beneath the widow's shawl. "We move," she said, though the words lacked their earlier certainty. Eli nodded and took a step toward her, then another. Walking felt like borrowing someone else's legs, but it was possible. What frightened him was how often she paused, how carefully she measured each breath. The desert watched them in silence, patient as always. When his knees buckled and he dropped to one knee, she turned sharply. "Up!" she ordered, but the command wavered. "No," Eli said, breath ragged. "Not like this." He looked at her, really looked, and saw the cost etched into her face. "I won't take any more from you." She knelt in front of him, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion behind them. "You don't choose," she said. "The desert—" A sharp crack split the air. Both of them froze. Another sound followed, voices. Distant but unmistakable. Men. Horses. Eli felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Prospectors, maybe, or scavengers. Men who saw the desert as something to conquer and anyone in it as an obstacle. Naya's head snapped toward the horizon. Movement flickered far off, dark shapes cutting through the glare, armed. She grabbed Eli's arm and hauled him upright with a strength that seemed to come from nowhere. "Now you walk," she said, low and urgent. "Now." They moved along the rocks, keeping low, the ground biting at their feet. A gunshot echoed again, closer this time, followed by laughter carried thinly on the wind. Eli stumbled, but Naya refused to let him fall, her grip iron despite the tremor in her hands. "If they see us," Eli began. "They won't," she said. "Or it won't matter." Behind them, dust rose as the riders spread out, searching. Ahead, the land dipped toward a narrow ravine, its shadows dark and promising. Eli forced his legs to obey, each step a decision, each breath a fight. As they slipped into the ravine's shelter, the sounds faded, swallowed by stone and distance. Naya finally released him and sagged against the rock, her eyes closing for just a moment too long. Eli caught her before she fell. For the first time since the desert had nearly killed him, he understood the truth completely. Surviving was no longer about him alone. Whatever came next, rescue, pursuit, or death, they would face it bound together, owing the desert nothing it hadn't.